David's story begins in a quiet place, not in a palace, not on a battlefield, not in front of kings, crowds, or important people. It begins in the fields where a young shepherd boy watched over sheep. David was the youngest son of Jesse, and in the eyes of many people, he was easy to overlook. When the prophet Samuel came to Jesse's house to anoint the next king of Israel, Jesse brought out his older sons first. They looked strong, they looked qualified, they looked like the kind of men people would expect God to choose. But one by one, God said no. Then Samuel asked Jesse, "Are these all your sons?" And Jesse said there was still the youngest, David, but he was out taking care of the sheep. David was so overlooked that he was not even invited to the gathering. But God saw him, and that is one of the first lessons from David's life. People may overlook you, but God does not. People may judge you by your age, your position, your background, or what you do not have yet. But God looks deeper. God told Samuel that man looks at the outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. When David was brought in from the field, God told Samuel to anoint him. The shepherd boy became the chosen king. But here is something important. David was anointed king long before he sat on the throne. He received the promise, but he still had to go back to the field. He was chosen, but he still had to serve. He was called, but he still had to wait. And that teaches us another lesson. Being chosen by God does not mean everything changes overnight. Sometimes God gives you a promise, but still allows you to go through preparation. The field was not a waste of time. The field was training. While David was taking care of sheep, God was teaching him courage, responsibility, patience, and faith. When no one was clapping for him, God was building him. Then came one of the most famous moments in David's life. The Israelites were facing the Philistines, and there was a giant named Goliath. Goliath was strong, loud, and terrifying. Every day he came out and mocked the army of Israel. The soldiers were afraid. Even King Saul was afraid. Then David came to the battlefield to bring food to his brothers. He was not there as a soldier. He was not there as a commander. He was just a young man running an errand. But when he heard Goliath insulting the people of God, something rose up inside him. David could not understand why everyone was so afraid. To David, Goliath was not bigger than God. He remembered what God had already helped him overcome in the field. He had fought lions, he had fought bears, and he believed the same God who delivered him before would deliver him again. David went to King Saul and said he would fight Goliath. Saul tried to dress David in his own armor, but it did not fit. David removed it and went with what he knew: his sling, his stones, and his faith in God. That is another powerful lesson. You do not need to wear someone else's armor to win the battle God has prepared you for. You do not need to copy someone else's style, someone else's strength, or someone else's journey. David did not defeat Goliath by pretending to be Saul. He defeated Goliath by trusting God with what was already in his hands. When David faced Goliath, he did not speak like a victim. He spoke with faith. He told Goliath that the battle belonged to the Lord. Then David ran toward the giant, released one stone, and Goliath fell. The giant that terrified an entire army was defeated by a young shepherd boy with faith. But David's story did not end with one victory. After Goliath, David became known. People praised him, songs were sung about him. But his success made King Saul jealous. Saul became threatened by David and tried to kill him. David had done nothing wrong, yet he found himself running for his life. He had been anointed king, but instead of entering the palace, he entered a season of hiding. He lived in caves. He experienced loneliness. He had opportunities to take revenge on Saul, but he refused. Even when Saul was within his reach, David would not harm him. David trusted God to fight for him. This part of David's life teaches us that waiting can be one of the hardest tests of faith. It is one thing to believe God when doors are opening. It is another thing to believe God when life feels unfair. David had a promise over his life, but he still had to wait for God's timing. He refused to force open a door that God had not opened yet. And that is a lesson many of us need. Do not let pain turn you into someone you were never meant to become. Do not let delay make you lose your character. Do not let people's actions make you step outside of God's will. In time, Saul died, and David eventually became king. The shepherd boy became the ruler of Israel. David led battles, he united the people, he brought strength to the nation. But David was not a perfect man. And this is one of the reasons his story is so powerful. David loved God, but he also made serious mistakes. One of the darkest moments in his life came when he saw Bathsheba, another man's wife. David desired her, took her, and then tried to cover up what he had done. His sin led to more sin. He arranged for Bathsheba's husband Uriah to be placed in danger on the battlefield, and Uriah died. David's fall shows us something very important. No matter how chosen, gifted, or successful a person becomes, they still need humility, discipline, and accountability. Victory in one season does not protect you from temptation in another. David defeated Goliath in public, but later he was defeated by desire in private. And that is a serious lesson. The battles we fight in secret matter too. The things we allow in our hearts matter. The choices we make when no one is watching matter. But God did not leave David in his sin. The prophet Nathan came to David and confronted him. When David realized the weight of what he had done, he did not make excuses. He did not blame someone else. He did not pretend it was not serious. David repented. He came before God with a broken heart. This is another lesson from David's life. Failure does not have to be the end of your story if you are willing to humble yourself and return to God. David faced consequences, but he also received mercy. He was not remembered as perfect. He was remembered as a man after God's own heart, not because he never sinned, but because when he fell, he returned to God. David's life was full of highs and lows. He was anointed, then ignored, chosen, then tested, victorious, then hunted, promoted, then humbled. He praised God in the good seasons and cried out to God in the painful ones. Many of the Psalms show us David's heart. Sometimes he worshipped, sometimes he wept, sometimes he felt afraid, sometimes he asked God why things were happening. But through it all, David kept bringing his heart back to God. And maybe that is one of the greatest lessons from his life. A strong relationship with God does not mean you will never struggle. It means you know where to run when you do. David teaches us that God can use people others overlook. He teaches us that preparation often happens in hidden places. He teaches us that courage is not the absence of fear, but faith in a God greater than the giant. He teaches us that waiting on God is better than forcing your own way. He teaches us that success without humility can become dangerous. He teaches us that repentance is powerful. And he teaches us that even after failure, God can still restore a surrendered heart. David's story reminds us that life is not always a straight path. Sometimes the road to purpose passes through fields, battles, caves, mistakes, tears, and mercy. But if your heart keeps turning back to God, your story is not over. The same God who saw David in the field sees you where you are. The same God who strengthened David before Goliath can strengthen you before your own battles. The same God who restored David after failure can restore you too. So when you feel overlooked, remember David in the field. When you feel afraid, remember David before Goliath. When you feel delayed, remember David in the caves. When you feel like you have failed, remember David's repentance. And when you wonder if God can still use your life, remember this. David was not perfect, but he was willing to keep coming back to God. The lesson in the story is this: God is not looking for a perfect person, He is looking for a surrendered heart.